I felt the air leave the room the exact second the laughter erupted. That fluorescent-lit conference room in our downtown Cleveland headquarters smelled like burnt coffee and yesterday's catered sandwiches from the local deli. It was the quarterly all-hands. The kind where executives patted themselves on the back while the rest of us nodded along. Victor Kane, our CEO with his perfectly gelled hair and that perpetual smirk of untouchable confidence, had been pacing the front like he owned the stage, which, technically, he did. His eyes landed on me like he'd practiced the move. "Look, if you're not happy here, Lena," he said, voice dripping with fake concern, "the exit door is right there." He pointed straight at the double doors behind the last row of chairs, like some games show host revealing a losing prize. The room exploded. Not polite chuckles, full, nervous laughter that rippled through the 50 or so people crammed in. People I'd mentored. People I'd covered for during late-night crunches. Even the ones who'd benefited from my quiet fixes over the years joined in. Safety in numbers, I guess. Better to laugh with the boss than risk becoming the next target. I didn't say a word. I closed my laptop with a soft click that somehow cut through the noise. Picked up the worn leather notebook I'd carried for 10 years, its pages filled with handwritten notes, tabs, and margin scribbles, and stood. No dramatic speech. No eye contact. I just walked. The laughter died instantly, replaced by that heavy, awkward silence that follows when everyone realizes they've crossed a line. My heels echoed down the hallway. But inside, something had shifted. Not broken, clicked. Like a switch finally flipping after years of flickering. That notebook wasn't a diary of complaints. It was 10 years of invisible scaffolding, vendor contacts with personal codes, rerouted shipments that saved quarters during the 2019 supply chain mess, emails timestamped at 3 a.m. that prevented legal disasters, and the exact sequences that kept our creaky logistics software looking seamless on paper. I'd never bragged. I'd let VPs take credit for team efforts while I caught the plates they dropped. I wasn't miserable. Exactly. I was exhausted from propping up egos who couldn't tell a real risk from a scapegoat. Tired of redoing presentations so some director could claim input. Tired of being the safety net. But Victor's point changed everything. In that moment, with every eye on me and his half-smile curling like he'd scored a win, he revealed how disposable he thought I was. Punchline. Replaceable. Something cold and precise settled in my chest, not hot rage, but calculated purpose. I wasn't leaving a job. I was stepping into a strategy. No monologue. No big scene. Just the notebook and the quiet realization that I'd been documenting their fragility all along. The elevator ride down felt eternal. I gripped the notebook like it was the only solid thing left. Outside, the October wind off Lake Erie bit sharp. But I walked the 3 blocks to my usual spot, a dimly lit coffee shop with wobbly tables and a barista who stopped asking questions after the first week. No strong Wi-Fi. Perfect isolation. I ordered black coffee, found the corner table, and opened the pages. The scent of espresso mixed with old ink. My pulse was steady now. The anger distilled into something useful. Page by page, I traced the real contributions they'd ignored, the flood-year reroutes I'd negotiated personally with suppliers, the junior analyst I'd shielded from firing after she flagged a pricing error, the late-night compliance saves. I noted contacts, vendors who delivered reliably if you mentioned their family, account managers who answered at odd hours. Patterns emerged. Trust built in the mundane, not the flashy town halls. Executives chased loyalty via ping-pong tables and surveys. Real loyalty lived in who returned calls at 2 a.m., who got paid on time, who remembered your kid's soccer game. I pulled out my personal laptop, never the company one, and a legal pad. Columns, assets, and grudges. Assets included trusted vendors, frustrated ex-employees I'd stayed in touch with, clients who'd seen my fixes firsthand. Grudges were the microslights, the VP who smirked after I corrected his numbers, the meeting where my male peer got introduced but I didn't, the CEO's reply to my proposal, "Let the guys review this," when I was the sole strategist. A line connected them. That's where the plan formed. The company ran on assumptions. No one below director level had real power. Approved processes were never double-checked. Ego shielded incompetence. I'd stay invisible. A ghost in the data. Not sabotage, too loud. Outfunction them. Tip the right domino quietly. The first one, Summit Freight. Mid-sized outfit 2 hours outside Cleveland. No flashy website, but they handled 35% of our specialty routing with almost zero executive oversight. Reliable. Overlooked. I'd met their owner, Marcus Reed, years back at a supplier event. Quiet. Broad-shouldered guy in steel-toed boots who remembered how we'd overpaid for rush jobs because some director missed a meeting. I called. We met at a roadside diner with vinyl booths and a jukebox. No small talk. I slid a folder across. Modest investment for 5% stake. No publicity. He studied the numbers. Then asked, "They ever thank you for that Kentucky mudslide reroute?" I smiled thinly. They credited the software. He nodded. That was our handshake. My severance and a line of credit, taken out preemptively, sealed it cleanly. With Summit secured through that quiet equity stake and a clause for renegotiation if referrals boosted their non-primary volume 10%, I felt the first real momentum. Marcus and I kept it handshake simple before lawyers formalized. No board seats. No announcements. I wanted influence, not spotlight. 2 weeks later, I reached out to Mia Torres. She'd been an account manager iced out during the last strategic realignment, code for her boss hating honest feedback about operational gaps. Her exit was clean, surgical. They expected her to fade. Instead, she went independent, advising key regional clients that made up nearly 25% of our volume but never appeared in glossy reports. I found her running a warehouse tech workshop. Same sharp ponytail. Same penetrating stare. We grabbed street tacos, eating off the dashboard of her car, like old times. "They got you too?" she asked. I shrugged. Tried. Forgot I'm not flammable. I laid out the vision, a subtle web of dependencies rerouting loyalty decision by decision. No hard sells, just questions planted. Ever notice delays with current routing? Open to testing alternatives with tighter SLAs. Mia wiped salsa from her chin. I'm in. Double my cut if it gets loud. It won't, I promised. That's the point. Absence over noise. We listed clients she could gently nudge. The pain points were real: late windows, fluctuating costs, poor syncs. I offered relief without fanfare. First week, one client shifted 7% of orders to Summit channels. Second week, 2 more. Mia made intros. I stayed off stage, tracking metrics like water rising behind a dam. Quiet investment meant invisible pressure until cracks appeared. Nights blurred in my apartment's glow from dual monitors. Space heater humming. Half-wilted plant judging silently from the sill. I dug through personal archives. Old emails. PDFs. Notes from my devices. Not hacks or NDA breaches, just breadcrumbs I'd saved for sanity. Now for leverage. Maps skipped audits. Delayed upgrades shelved for better demos. Ignored risk flags I'd submitted that vanished into executive voids. They used warnings as coasters. The breakthrough hit at 3:47 a.m. One Tuesday. Bloodshot eyes. Cold tea. Cat glaring from the couch. Buried in an old vendor renewal file. License _trigger_provision_V3_final. Section 6C. Page 12. If key personnel in Appendix B face involuntary termination without documented cause or minimum 30 business days transition notice. Operational license stewardship reverts to the secondary party in 6C. Appendix B listed me. 6C named an independent trust I'd quietly established 3 years earlier during a risk audit. I'd suggested it to offload liability. They signed eagerly. Distracted by shinier priorities. Fired publicly on Zoom without notice or paperwork. By their own terms. Stewardship and exclusive authority over third-party integrations tied to the core routing architecture transferred to me. Not full ownership, but veto power and approval rights. Summit already controlled growing share via my referrals. My heart didn't race. I leaned back. A small, sharp smile forming. They'd handed me the fuse and locked the door, assuming I'd disappear. Instead, legal untraceable leverage. I compiled everything, printed binder with bullet points, sources, timelines, flagged concerns they'd ignored. Not criminal, but operationally negligent, damning in an industry where clients scrutinized fine print before renewing. At dawn, I closed it. Not revenge. Revelation. Their empire of shortcuts and assumptions. Now time-stamped evidence. I started small with 4 long-term clients I'd personally helped. Emails from an industry contact noting Q1 routing friction. Offering quiet alternatives. Direct. Effective. Friction landed because everyone felt it. No promises of revolution, just aspirin. Mia amplified with subtle confirmations. Clients tested small percentages, trial shipments, pilot routes. They peeled away not from betrayal, but survival, stepping off a shaky escalator 1 foot at a time. From outside, normal market shifts. Internally, fragile load balancing would feel every 5 to 8% deviation in forecasting. One client followed up post-trial. Your suggested path just works. I sent scaled proposals without gloating. By month end, 8 clients diverted portions through Summit. Under radar. No LinkedIn fanfare. Death by accumulated preference. Headquarters dashboards would soon show minor dips. Variance spikes. Vendor overlaps. Nothing alarming yet, but enough to unsettle analysts. This wasn't sabotage. Gravity. With me tilting the plane. The first visible crack came via a recalibrated Tuesday route. Summit adjusted flex scheduling for a client quietly shifting volume my way. Externally, clerical. Internally at Apex, it flagged red on SLAs they bragged about never missing. Procurement lead, Dan Ellis, cufflinks on Zoom, all surface charm, reached out to Marcus Reed. Marcus looped me and muted on a second line. Video off. I listened silently as Dan chuckled falsely. Some irregularities lately. Nothing major. Marcus. Zone adjustments based on load forecasts. Fuel rates updated. Like your team cited before. Dan's laugh strained. CFO's asking. Maybe check authorizations. Marcus. Perhaps your CFO should review who's approved for changes. Silence. I unmuted. Section 6C remains active. Termination voided integration privileges. I've exercised stewardship for continuity. So far. Gently. Dan stammered about escalation. Legal review. I've already forwarded the memo and timeline to your general counsel. Call ended clean. No shouts. Just paper trail and impending headache. Over following weeks. Deprioritized windows. Shrinking buffers. Data formatting changes requiring manual reruns, stretched deadlines. Client responsiveness dipped. Internal slacks lit up. Why renewal stalling? Tier 2 routes lagging? A forwarded internal alert memo hit my inbox. Operational exposure scenario V2. Urgent. Red boxes everywhere. Vendor risks. Potential client churn. Lost redundancy. My fingerprints invisible, but effects everywhere. Panic built slowly. A gasp after prolonged exhale. They saw temporary dip. Not engineered blueprint. A piece ran in the Midwest Logistics Journal, 3 paragraphs between emissions updates and a rail startup profile. Irregularities in routing consistency and retention at major Ohio fulfillment firm. Unresolved vendor issues. Restructuring gaps without transitions. No names. But insiders knew. I hadn't written it. Met the editor weeks prior. Dropped breadcrumbs. Smart journalists verify independently. She hit public filings on the stewardship transfer. Leak festered. Not exploded. Vendors texted old contacts. Hearing weird stuff from Apex? Late pays? Nervous about capacity. LinkedIn went silent. No weekly puff posts. Procurement DMs buzzed. Screenshots of delays from Apex? Load confirmations bouncing. Someone referenced Clause X, old internal shorthand for the provision. Once joked on whiteboards. Now whispered like a curse. Support beams rotting quietly. Creaks preceded crash. A finance partner downgraded credit risk quietly. Triggering holdbacks. Inside. I pictured Monday meetings turning icy. Forecasts sliding. Task forces forming. Continuity stabilization. Spreadsheets and deodorized panic. Silence grew louder once recognized as deliberate. They called an emergency Sunday session. Leaked photos showed junior attorneys still in church shoes. CEO hand over mouth staring at damning numbers. Agenda. Identify disruptions. Assess risk. Reintegrate. Fixes backfired. Renegotiations with Summit stalled without my sign-off. Client offers ignored because trust had shifted. Legal saber-rattling. Cease and desist forwarded with cute. General counsel's mutually beneficial options met my start with clause enforcement. 3 outside firms rotated. None bypassed the signed terms. Laziness locking them in. They built the trap. I remembered the exits. Departments fractured. Procurement bottlenecked blindly. Client services overwhelmed. Sales discounting unsustainably. Legal begging no discoverable emails. CEO froze on a key client call. Guarantee no more misses? Stuttered about evolving partnerships. Termination letter arrived 48 hours later. Another domino. In my apartment, I watched detached, not joy or rage, but stillness. Coffee. Notebook. Metrics. Scientist and observer at the autopsy of self-inflicted rot. They didn't lose to me, they lost to unchecked assumptions. Board chose a neutral hotel suite downtown, blackout curtains. Overpriced water. 6 attendees. Tailored suits hiding sweat. Legal advisors reading faces. One younger woman watching hawk-like. I arrived early. Black envelope only. No theatrics. This is a stipulation. 3 points. Not threat, a way out. No one reached first. Your structural advantage is gone. Fight. And clauses. Partners. Clients trigger fully. Stipulation. Transfer routing architecture and chains to neutral trust under my quiet stewardship. Public statement acknowledging missteps. Thanking unnamed architects. Stepping back from sectors. Mutual non-disparagement. You keep dignity left. I keep what you dismissed. CEO absent. Advised against direct contact, probably reverse engineering in a lawyer's office. They read slowly. Lawyer's pen tapped nervously, echo of ignored workshop years ago. They signed. Quiet agreement from surrender. Not respect. I left before ink dried. Sidewalks smelled of impending rain that never fell. No backward glance. Work complete. I didn't win a war. Outlasted a flawed system. Carved stability for reliable vendors, analysts who'd flagged errors, partners who delivered unnoticed. They got silence, heavier than verdicts. Notebook filed away like spent tool. Exit doors suit those without plans. I rearranged quietly, then walked free. Not empty-handed. Not victorious, just certain. What lingers isn't triumph, but the question: how many invisible hands hold up empires we celebrate? And what happens when they withdraw? In boardrooms and late nights, silence weighs. Some laugh until it echoes back empty. Others build quietly enough to endure.